welcome. So today we will be, one quick thing, you can move to the next slide. Don't worry if you don't catch all the links that are going to be shared on the slides. We will definitely put them in the chat. And Amy, you can advance to the next slide. It's our mission statement. The next one, please. So today we're going to be, Eric's going to run us through some federal updates. I'll do some brief state updates, and then we'll talk about policy priorities for 2024. The year is almost gone, so it's really time to take a look forward and see what we want to prioritize for next year. We'll give you some MICA updates. Yes, we will be, hi Kim, yes, we will be sending the slides, and the recording is on our YouTube site, but yes, we will be sending that out as well as the links. So happy to do that. And then we want to hear from you. Things that are going on in your community, things that you see as issues, any notable updates you want to give us about what's going on around the state. We'd love to hear from you. And then anything that you're thinking about in terms of advocacy, we'd love to hear that. This is participatory. So again, we will be sending everything out at the end, probably towards the end of the week. So next slide, please. And I would like to segue it over to Eric Hufnagel, our CEO.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate it. Nice to see everybody today. Hope you're having a good week so far. I'm going to go quickly through some federal updates. There's some things that we've already talked about in the last couple of meetings, but I just want to reiterate where we're at and encourage your participation and engagement at the federal level. But I want to let Lisa have the bulk of the time to talk about the state level stuff, but also the priorities for the upcoming year that we're working on. So President Biden did sign the short-term continuing resolution that was adopted by Congress. As most of you know, we talked about it at the last meeting, but he did sign it, and that does extend the funding through January 19th, which means that we'd have a small window of time really to be working with our members of Congress to make sure that indeed they're focused on ensuring adequate funding for housing and homelessness programs in the upcoming year's budget. And we do need to be the squeaky wheel on this one, because it is a small window of time that will evaporate quickly, and there are a lot of competing interests. So you see that, oops, sorry, I need to pull that last bullet out, disregard that. But there is a small window of time then for them to be working on this. Next slide, please. I wanted to just remind everybody that the Senate did pass the THUD spending bill back in November, and I just wanted to make sure that I reiterated that that was really a bipartisan vote on that, with no specific amendments being proposed with respect to HUD's budget, and that they were looking at $70 billion for affordable housing, homelessness, and community development programs. So that's an increase. Again, good news there. House coming up. The next slide. At the last meeting, we talked about them being ready to take a vote on their draft bill the following week, but that didn't happen. I don't understand how the House had a hiccup with their schedule, because everything has been going so glowingly this year. I don't know how they could have missed a deadline on it. I am being facetious with that. So the House draft is less than what the Senate was proposing, but it would have also been a concern for us, because there are a long list of proposed cuts that could take place, and also a number of amendments that were being proposed that would be very damaging. And I went through a number of those last time, but just to let you know, those are still floating around out there. That's why we really do need to have these conversations, so that none of them actually gets traction. Next slide, please. So again, as we talked before, when we look at these budgets that are being proposed by the House and Senate, there will be some negotiations that take place between those two chambers once we actually have the House bill. But both of them are going to be affecting the housing choice voucher based on how we know it. And I'm sorry we're cut off there at the bottom, but this is a recap of what we talked about last time, but I just want to remind you about it. When we look at the amount of rent increase that's taken place over the last year, when we think about the renewals, we know that if we're saying that the funding is going to be steady, it is a net loss. When we have renewals, then you have higher rents and the same amount of money that's available for those. So in effect, the allocation of vouchers gets reduced. So some people get basically shut out of the housing choice voucher program. So we really want to be talking about that and the importance in the upcoming budget to make sure that adequate funding is provided to ensure that we don't lose vouchers going forward. Next slide, please. So last time we also included an update budget chart from the National Low Income Housing Coalition, and we have an analysis of the House proposal and the Senate funding bill as well for you to take a look at. When you have extra time and you want to geek out, you can take a look at those. Next slide, please. So this is where I wanted to just remind everybody, as I referred to early in my comments, that we need to continue to be the voice. We have to contact our members of Congress. So I'm really encouraging all of you to do that in one way or another. A lot of you have attended these meetings. Some of you actually reached out to your members of Congress, but this is the time where it's really important for us because of the troubling waters that are ahead with respect to the budget process. One thing that I didn't touch on to remind everybody is that there was a deal that was made by President Biden with respect to one of the previous continuing resolutions that took place. And we're actually looking at the possibility of the Fiscal Responsibility Act affecting and triggering some automatic cuts. If there isn't a budget that's put together, there is a chance that we could lose some funding as a result of that deal taking place. And there are some members of the House on one side of the aisle who are actually looking at that as an opportunity to initiate or to trigger some cuts that would be across the board cuts. So we need to be talking to them. We have the contact information. We'll be putting that in the links as well for you to be able to reach out to them with some information about talking points, which you want to be keying in on. Of course, the housing choice vouchers are important. And just a reminder that only 1 in 4 households who are eligible for rental assistance are actually receiving that. So we want to make sure that is a strong message that we share with both the state senators, senators from our state, as well as our members of the House of Representatives. Next slide, please. In addition to actually doing some one-on-one contact with those offices, want you to think in terms of your own organization. If you haven't already done so, joining in on the sign-on letter, national sign-on letter that the Campaign for Housing and Community Development Funding has been putting out. We shared this in the past, and some of you have signed on, but really want to encourage you to have those conversations in your organization with the appropriate person about the ability for your agency to sign on to it as well, because the more the numbers are important. So the more organizations that we can get to join in on it, the better off we will be. So please take action. Doesn't take a lot of time. Again, the National Low Income Housing Coalition has an action center. Just to remind you, you can go there and look for other tools and tips, etc., to get engaged throughout the year. So I encourage you guys to do that as an individual or as an organization. And I believe that's my last slide. Turning it back over to you, Lisa, for more exciting stuff.
I am talking on mute. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. One thing I did want to mention too is that Eric and I were in Washington, D.C. with the National Low Income Housing Coalition for their state partner meeting just a few short weeks ago in D.C. And we heard some kind of previews from a Republican lobbyist about the next year and what it portends, and ways to do advocacy and work with members, even if you perceive them to be coming from a different place, I will say. And he said, you know, getting that frontline information, their direct services, maybe data and statistics are really helpful, but put a human face on it, you know, personalize, don't politicize, which I thought was really great. Try to find some common ground with the legislators and, you know, areas of policy where we can collaborate and work together, have the same goals, and really focus on substance and not ideology. So I thought that was really helpful information just overall in thinking about working with some folks that might not have the same frame of reference as you do, but ways to kind of really be effective in advocacy and moving things along is finding that common ground and then moving forward from there. So just wanted to put this on your radar, the National Low Income Housing Coalition Policy Forum. It's their annual gathering. It's being held in person again in DC, March 19th through the 21st. And a couple of us, Aisha Wilson and I, are planning on attending, and just wanted to make sure that you have this on your radar also. It's a great gathering. Next slide, please. A few state updates from me. Not a lot of action on the source of income protections. The House did not take this up in committee in November after it was passed by the Senate in October. There was really only about a week or 10 days worth of session in November before the adjournment. So that gives us time to really, you know, circle our wagons with our advocates. We have a sign-on letters. Ashley put together this lovely logo document, so we can add more if you can squeeze them in or do another page. But we would love to have you sign on to indicate your support for the source of income protections legislation. And we are going to continue to do just some research on the House now that the House will hopefully be taking up the measures in the committee. It's the Judiciary Committee, and there are 5 Republicans that we will be doing a little research on and trying to, you know, get some messaging out to them, as well as taking another run at our talking points and our messaging with our Coalition for Expanding Housing Access. So if you want to be a part of that coalition, you can feel free to email me. Be happy to add your name to our list. We meet every other Thursday, and just to kind of talk about advocacy for this legislation. We are also developing a municipal support letter that some communities have either done ordinances or signed. Next, just some quick updates. There's a bill for supposed to be coming. The language is being developed by Representative Carter for an expansion of the state ID fee waiver. So this would be really good news. It would expand it to 200% of poverty, which would cover all of the income-based waivers, including the ALS population. So the language is being worked on right now, but the hopes are that it will be introduced in January. It's not a complete free state ID for every person that's interested, as we kind of had hoped, but at least it's an expansion of what currently is a lot of carve-outs, especially for those who are literally homeless. So that's good news there. There's some other bills in the works, including junk rental fees, application fee legislation, eviction and ceiling expungement, which is an expansion on what was introduced last session. Senator Schenck is taking this up, as well as Representative Carter is doing some legislation around either an ordinance or kind of a resolution that would kind of promote to communities that they should take up legislation locally to kind of tighten the regulations for incidences of mold and housing. We are looking for folks that have been impacted by this. So if you have somebody who has experienced mold in their housing to the point where the housing is not habitable, we'd really be interested, or it's impacted their health, we'd be interested in hearing from people. We need people to testify or put personal experiences on the record. And then you may have heard that the Michigan House is currently tied 54-54 as two of the representatives who are running for mayor in November both won their races, one in Warren and one in Westland. So there are two open seats. So those two seats will be filled with a January primary and an election, I believe, April 16th. So for now, it looks like maybe legislation that is more bipartisan or more easily appealing to members that will not as, partisan will get passed. And then hopefully in April, when those seats are filled, more things can move through. Just wanted to note that Representative Coleman was the chair of the Housing Subcommittee in the House, and he has been replaced with Representative Christian Grant from the west side of the state. Next slide, please. One other quick thing, and we noted this last month, HUD is seeking public comment on a proposed rule that would eliminate HUD's use of criminal convictions or restrictions on people who serve as fair housing testers, and it would take away certain convictions and prior felonies. So that's a good thing for HUD, and so they're seeking public comment, and I think Ashley put this link in the chat. I'm just taking a moment because I know I saw a question about sending people. You can send them to me, and if one of my colleagues could put my email in the chat, I'd appreciate it. You can refer people to me because I'm reviewing that language for Representative Carter on mold. All right, next slide, please. So now we want to take some time and kind of think about our policy priorities, reflect on those that we had for 2023. And do we want to continue these? Is there anything we want to, we've solved this issue, or we, advocated sufficiently so it's no longer an issue? Or are there things that we need to continue or things that we need to add? So let's move to the next slide and we'll walk through each of these 4 pillars. And I'll address the state ID issue in a moment. So I'll make a note for myself. So the first really big bucket of priorities are around increasing access to affordable housing. So 4 bullets here, 4 priorities. Of course, increasing the supply. This is really tied to priorities in the state plan that we saw introduced last year and the regional housing partnerships that are working this year. I think a lot of them are really looking at increasing the supply, as we know that affordable housing is definitely severely lacking and we've been losing ground for decades. Increasing funding for permanent supportive housing, supporting housing first strategies. We've seen pushback, both federally, most notably, and sometimes around the state for housing first strategies, which doesn't mean that you don't support the person or there aren't other resources that are allocated towards somebody, but the primary focus is moving somebody into housing quickly first and then working on all the other challenges that they might have. And then enacting tenant protections. We know that there's a lot of legislation that were on a state level that were proposed in Michigan. I think I counted about 25. Only really one of those passed, and it was one around notifying tenants when there was a code that, like a violation of code. So a lot of the really impactful ones are still pending. So I think that's something that we want to continue to advocate for. So I'm going to look in the chat and see, or if you want to raise your hand, or if you want to come off mute and make a comment about anything that we're missing here? Anything you think we don't need to continue in terms of a policy priority?
Hi, Lisa. This is Amanda Carlisle from the Washtenaw Housing Alliance. I was meeting with folks from DHHS a couple of weeks ago because here in Washtenaw, like many communities, we're kind of experiencing, a increase in unsheltered homelessness and family homelessness. And one of the things that they had mentioned was they were working on was increasing support for emergency shelters and also staff salaries for those, I think, in shelter, but I would argue across the homeless sector. And that's also a priority of the National Alliance to End Homelessness. So just wondering if those could be incorporated or are under, one of these broader priorities.
Yeah, so we specifically, I think, have one in terms of other supports, funding for sheltering and shelter improvements. So you're talking about more broadly, like homeless response system staffing?
Nope, that would be included what you just said. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be in it's really like the fourth pillar. Is there anything else that I missed? I know it's also a priority of the campaign to end homelessness as well. So we can definitely call that out. That's not in there specifically. Anyone else? Okay. You seem okay. Keep. Is there a limit to how much? There is not a limit. There's that's a good question, Linda. There's pending legislation that would, when I talk about junk fees, and I'm assuming that, that it's a catch-all phrase, but it definitely speaks to all of the crazy fees that are being charged. And that language is been worked on this year. It has not been introduced, but we're hoping it will be because we know it is getting really egregious out there, and there's a lot of fees that are being charged, and it's a range, and it's not there's no parameters, there's no law like there is for security deposits. So there is no limit right now, but that is something that definitely the junk fee in rental housing legislation would cover. So I appreciate that. All right, if there's nothing else, we can move, and thanks, Aisha, for putting my email in the chat. We can move to the next pillar, which is reducing barriers. And right now we just have two. We have preserve and expand income supports. And this is really kind of a very broad statement that if you have suggested additional language or something that would be more pointed, we can add that. We also talk about criminal justice reform and expanding housing options for persons exiting criminal justice settings. There is an existing piece of legislation now that is House Bill 4878. I think I got that right. That is the Fair Chance to Housing Act. That would it deals with people with certain criminal backgrounds being a two-stage process for landlords that for people that are applying for rental housing. So it would be, the first stage is every other, do they meet the income criteria? If you check credit, do they have credit, that would qualify? And then the second stage, if they've approved, if they meet all those criteria, then they get a conditional offer of housing, and then the landlord then can move to the second stage where they would only look at certain, I think it's, arson or manufacturing meth, and then certain other crimes within I think a 3-year look back period. So there is definitely a pending bill that covers that, but if there's anything else that people want to add, we can certainly do that. Or consider. Anyone have any, or any other barriers? Doesn't have to be in these two categories. So I did want to, I don't see any hands. I didn't hear anything. So I did want to float one to you. That is something that we've been hearing more about.
I'm sorry. I
Go
do
ahead.
have a question.
Yeah,
I apologize for interrupting. My fingers didn't work fast enough.
no
Sorry.
worries at all.
Okay. So my question is actually a little bit different than existing criminal persons.
Yeah.
And it is in regards to barriers between, and I just want to try to explain this quickly, between my HAP, okay, program policy, with regards to the My HAP program for the grant, okay, for the COVID grant, 25,000. The barrier being that the agreement between them and homeowners is different. The sections are different than the agreement between My HAP and the participating service contract agreement, being home mortgage facilitators. Okay, so there is quite the barrier between the verbiage of what is expected through the contracts between the two are different. And I have a personal story, and I won't get into it right this moment, maybe at the end, or and actually, Lisa, we have spoken about this previously.
Yeah.
My case is still ongoing.
Yeah.
And I have been advocating so tremendously with so many different levels. And I feel personally that my particular case and story is being ignored, a blind eye to the actual proof I have of this. So I just wanted that there is a problem within the verbiage and policies program within that program between homeowner and then participating servicing people or companies. Yeah.
Thank you, Marlene.
Okay. Sure.
And I know that's, and you're actually the first person that I've heard of. We typically don't work with homeowners. Our folks are typically folks that are unhoused or housing unstable, but I know that, you know, the program, it's the My HAF, HAF, it's Homeowner Assistance Fund. For those of you that aren't familiar with the acronym, then it's a program that MISTA is administering. And it's something that is pretty specific to add here, but maybe we can think of you know, a way to phrase it about policy and program.
Well, we're trying to avoid me being homeless.
Right. Well, absolutely.
Yeah, ultimately, that's what ends up happening. Right. So then I would be then in a category of a tenant, or, you know, and I'm going to lose my home only to be homeless and then have to go through a whole other type of programs that the other, you know, programs. So yeah, it's kind of like not the same, but influenced by, and yeah, it's complicated, very complicated.
It is. So I'm trying to think of a way to, you know, use it. But do you know how many people are impacted similarly to you?
You know, I do not, but I have done so much. It's on a daily that I do so much work on this. And not only have I worked on my particular mortgage facilitator with the Finance Protection Bureau on complaints that they have had in the past that other homeowners have gotten to lose their home, you know, and I don't know what the result of that is, because we don't know, you know, the next what happened after they lost their home. However, like I said, I just keep doing my homework. And I do want to also add, Lisa, that I personally, and I know you know a little bit of my passion in regards to helping the community service. I wanted to get certain certification to get involved more in the community service career path.
Mhm.
I actually went to a homeless shelter, or I should say homeless facility that does soup kitchens, pantry, and clothing. And they're about to launch a new warming center starting January. And I worked with them for a month personally to get more insight on this whole homelessness and how we as a community contribute, assist, and really like right from the bottom. This is where I've been doing this physically, helping, and
Yep,
then also
thank you.
administratively helping the source coordinator in
Okay,
helping these. Yeah, so
yeah,
I'm involved in a
that's
whole area
wonderful.
of.
And I know
Yes.
you're a great advocate, as you
Thank
and I
you.
have talked, yeah. So that's a great way of getting involved. There's a lot of opportunities, both paid and volunteer. A lot of communities are standing up warming centers, I know, right now. So, one thing I did want to share, and I'm going to try to figure out how to phrase Marlena's comment about the difference in, policy and funding, and then the program, how they enact, carry out the program guidelines. But I did also want to quote something about another barrier that we're seeing is the criminalization of homelessness. And I know that's both going on nationally and here in Michigan. We had a session, we had a panel in October at the summit, and it's more prevalent than I even knew about, and hearing about communities cutting down trees so they can see tents and tarps, closing roads and parks so people can't get down to campsites. So it's something that I think we're going to be adding. And I just wanted to share that with you and see if anyone had any thoughts about that. And then I'm looking in the chat. Kirsten is saying, I'm aware that Detroit has a right to counsel ordinance for folks facing evictions. There is some discussion about right to counsel at the state level. It was something that we prioritized from the campaign to end homelessness for the governor's executive office. We make a recommendation every year. It's a steep price tag because you have to hire a lot of attorneys to be able to provide that service to people. So not something that I don't think we continued it for this year, but I could be wrong. But it's something that we could definitely consider. It's definitely a barrier for people. People tend to, if they don't have representation, the outcome is much worse for them, for sure. So we can talk about that. Anything else? And Erin, thank you for your affirmation.
Just to add there is currently a bill for statewide right to counsel proposed, and I can link that in the chat.
Okay, thanks, Ashley. And yes, eviction prevention. Thank you, Amanda. Assistance. It's something that we've included 2 years in a row now on our letter to the governor, and this year it's not public yet. It should be coming out after the ICH meeting later this month, but it is definitely something that's being, I think, one of 6 priorities, because the $5 million in funding that Mishta had allocated is not going to go very far. And so it's just really something that, now that we don't have the SARA program or anything, definitely needs to be included. Funding for diversion. Okay, Adrian, thank you. Great. Thanks, everyone. Keep it coming. All right, we can move to the next slide. Please, Amy. And this next pillar is reducing disparity and racial inequities. So just looking at reducing housing discrimination for people of color, immigrants, people with disabilities, And then there's a new legislation that got introduced again this session, just, I want to say, I think it was in late October, again, for requiring a racial equity impact analysis for any legislation that covers or impacts social determinants of health, which is a pretty broad swath. And so those House bills, 5015 and 5016 were introduced again, and also will be introduced in the Senate. Companion bills or moved to the Senate. Okay, I'm looking at the chat. Renee is saying, under access to affordable housing, I work with folks on fixed income due to disability, more funding, and development of project-based subsidized housing for seniors. Okay. Great. And I'm not sure if there is any foreclosure protection, Marlena. I know there might be some that protects renters who are living in housing that the landlord, you know, they don't pay their taxes or something. You can look at that. But one thing I did want to mention is our annual Michigan data report is going to be coming out shortly. And you may have heard that homelessness increased 8% overall as an average over the state. And there was quite a wide variety in some places. Some regions had increases and some had decreases. But one of the big takeaways is that there's a rising kind of crisis among elderly people with rising homelessness, as well as, I don't know if any of you caught Mitch Albom's column in the Free Press yesterday, and it was also in MERS, that the really shocking statistic that there's a rise in suicides among elderly, particularly white men, which was super surprising to me. So a lot of concerns about that. So we can definitely add some stuff around funding for senior housing, project-based subsidy. Thank you. Yes, limited options, and we need a lot more of all kinds of subsidized housing, but yeah. Thank you, Ashley. Next slide, please. And if you have any thoughts about, you know, anything else to include under those disparities, racial equity impacts, let me know. Other supports here, we talked about funding for sheltering and shelter improvements, which was some of the suggestions or priorities by the Campaign to End Homelessness last year. And there were RFPs that went out for shelters around the state to ask for, you know, structural improvements, boilers, windows, you know, accessibility. But there's only so much money each year. So it's continuing to be in need, as well as establishing shelters in some communities that don't have any at all. And then we can also add under this, you know, increases for staff who work in front lines and shelters. And then we also talked about increased mental health supports, because that continues to be a big need as well. Anything else here that doesn't make any of those categories, or just something that you're thinking about or seeing in your community that you think should be a policy priority that you want to put on our radar? Oh, looking for volunteer. I know there's a, you know, difficulties. Yeah, shift volunteers for warming centers. Yeah, and a lot of warming centers. Well, I know some are. I'm involved in the Macomb COC board, and they actually have paid staff, and then kind of partner up with some of the congregation, the faith-based congregations, to provide meals and other things like that as volunteers. So I know it's definitely something that is a need as well. So I can note that. So thank you. Anything else? everybody. All right. You can go to the next slide then. Thank you, Amy. And just again, anything else, and it doesn't have to be this minute. If you think of something later on, this week, this month, just shoot me an email if something comes to mind, or you're talking with somebody in your community and they bring up an issue. We're always open to hearing what's going on. So next slide, please. I mentioned the issue around criminalization of homelessness, and we had a panel at the summit and heard from a lot of communities. So we are starting a peer learning community, which is going to be a monthly kind of Zoom call, an interactive discussion for people to talk about what's going on, and also to talk about alternatives, but also some ideas for getting out ahead of it, what you can be doing now so that your community does not enact an ordinance against people sitting or lying in a public roadway, or leaving their possessions in a public park or something like that. So we are going to be having our first meeting December 14th, which is a Thursday at 2:00 in the afternoon. That's the Zoom link right there. Or you can email me if you want a calendar invite. I can send you that. So I would love to have people join us and have a really good conversation. Next slide, please. So this is a time during this call where we hear from you. If there's anything you want us to know about your community, anything that's happening, or anything that you're advocating for, we'd love to hear about it.
Hi, me again.
Hi, Marlena.
Yes, I can't tell you how much I've been advocating for myself. And I feel like I'm playing the lawyer, the personal, individual, community person, humanitarian here, or I'm just a human trying to, at this point, I don't even feel like I'm living fulfillment of any kind, except for what I do to give back to the community, which I try to do so often as possible. But I am not working, so I do have some time to work on my own case, to help out the community any which way I can. But the most important thing that I'm finding right now, personally, is, of course, policy that we kind of went through, and injustice in the sense that I found in my case in particular, there was let me go back, because I did make a quick note here, that I found a falsifying document and brought it to the attention of, the state. And for whatever reason, I brought it to their attention multiple times, and it was never addressed. So, I unfortunately do not have the funds for a lawyer. I also did do as I was supposed to do and look for the free assistance for through the government with that, and they couldn't take my case. Of course, they're overwhelmed. And I'm trying, of course, to fight for this case myself, but it's very difficult when you're dealing with a big corporation, and then the government only sees what they're responding to. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, it's almost like every week I add to my case. And I did contact, this has to do federal. I did contact the my particular district 12, a congresswoman.
Good.
Yes, I did. And I actually spoke to the representative today, and we're going to have a meeting tomorrow at 10, because she did get a response from the state.
Wonderful.
And the state once again wants me to appeal it once again. It's like, why do I even need to do that? Why are you making me lose my mind with this case? So it is also jeopardizing my mental health. And when you spoke briefly about how the suicidal rates in
Senior.
reference to adults, older generation. I'm 55 years old. I've been through a lot in my my lifetime, but I tell you, this is the most I've ever had to fight for my freedom and justice. So it has caused me so much mental stress and physical, because I have not been able to fully recover from my personal situation I have with my recovery on my right knee replacement. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
so
yeah.
I just wonder if anyone on the call has any resources for you or any thoughts. I can tell you, I know from having talked with Marlena that she's a wonderful advocate, very detailed and does great research. And so if there's a stone that she hasn't turned over, I'm sure she'd like to hear about it. But if anybody has any thoughts, she's, working with
Yes.
lender and Mishta, and it's very complicated. So
Yes.
thank you
Thank
for
you, Lisa.
sharing your story, though. And so just opening it up, if anyone,
Yeah.
you can put it in the chat if you have any suggestions for Marlena. Anyone else? So Aaron's suggesting that a housing counseling agency. And remind me again, put in the chat what the name of the or the community or county that you're living in. So you can do that. And then somebody's asking me ordinances that small communities should be aware of to take Protection Act. Oh, that's a wonderful question. So can smaller communities do ordinances? One of the things that I wanted to mention was that I met with a city council person who's a city councilman in Westland, and they are thinking about enacting a source of income protection ordinance in Westland. Right now, 13 Michigan communities have it in their city or township law. And so that's, definitely something that you can take up. If you want to email me, I'll be happy to, either we can set up something or I can send you some documents. I have lots of resources and yeah, so some best practices for local municipalities. And I would definitely say be a part of your continuum of care. That's the homeless response system that meets on a monthly basis. As many folks in other sectors that can be involved in that in a proactive way, so that you're already discussing when an issue comes up. You're already involved with each other, and you're not just jumping in when there's a problem. Oh, Wayne Westland. Okay, Marlena. Okay, thank you. Lisa Tenser, nice to see you.
Hi, Lisa. Good to see you and everyone here. I wanted to just flag, I know when I was working in Detroit, I saw a lot of issues with homeowners, and especially like homeowners of color and Black homeowners with different issues like furnaces and home repairs and accessibility modifications. And these was also a lot of older homeowners. So I was just flagging that. I'm curious if you all are thinking about anything on that home ownership side for policy priorities.
We haven't, as far as I know, and Eric, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we can definitely, look at that, because I know, yeah, it's, definitely a source of discrimination, both on the lending side, and we're seeing, Marlena on the, well, she's applying for a specific program, and I don't know if there's any data out to see what that looks like, but we can definitely take a look at that.
We haven't done it historically with respect to home ownership issues or housing in that sense. And part of that has to do with us trying to stay in our lane a little bit with respect to what expertise we have in our wheelhouse, but the other is just simply one of limited resources, and how are we able to spread ourselves out with respect to the reach we have in the topics and what we pull under that umbrella of policy priorities. So while there's so much stuff we could and should be doing, we know we have to be realistic about what we actually are going to be focusing on.
So we haven't historically focused on that.
Correct.
Area.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. All right, I want to make sure I'm mindful that I have a couple more slides, and I know Amy's going to give us a little update. So let's thank you everyone for your great feedback. Amy, turn it to you now.
Thank you, Lisa. This is Amy Stevenson, the communications manager. I just wanted to thank, in case if any of the agencies or groups happen to even be on this call, but all the groups across the state who celebrated Homeless Awareness Month. We've tracked over 50 agencies and groups that participated. There were probably more, but there was some great traction with both attendance from MICA in person, which are two of the photos to the left. That's our training manager, Allison, went to a Project Connect for out of Wayne, and we had a few other folks attend. So we were happy to be more out in the field this year. And then just, again, to thank all the agencies that participated in addition to their busy schedule for Homeless Awareness Month. Some things to look forward to in 2024, whether you've never done a HAM event or you've done one every year and you have it down to a science. I am going to have some fundraising training with the agency that's donating their time to help you raise funds. That'll be in, I think, July. And then media training from some folks from MLive and other newspapers to help you promote your event with press releases and things. So those are just two of the new ways that MICA will be providing support, but we also just work hard to share your events on social media, which we did quite a bit in November. Also, I just wanted to point out, I have a training coming up this week. Marketing Isn't Magic, Build Your 2024 Marketing Plan. And it's a really interactive workshop, whether you've done a marketing plan every year and just want to fine tune it, or you've never done one at all and you don't even know what it means. We welcome everybody. And it's just to create a basic roadmap for you for this upcoming year for marketing, whether that's social media, event planning, press releases, things like that. We would love for you to come. If you're a member, it's free and you get a follow-up consult with me to go over the plan. If you're not a member, it's only $25. And then the last piece, kind of under communications, is I just wanted to share with you that this year MICA will be issuing an annual report to capture all the work that we do, advocacy just being one of them, but being a very significant one. So this is just a quick screenshot of one of the pages that are still in draft form under advocacy. So that will be emailed out to all of you by the end of the year, and you can look through that and give us your feedback. And then I don't have a slide for it, but I just work closely with Lisa for these LAC meetings and other advocacy, just to make sure you get the meeting notices in time, that the registration is clear. But the one piece for 2024 I'm looking to improve upon on my end is how we get these action alerts back out to you. So I know we send them, we send them out from the chat or the slides, but it's not always done by me on a timely basis, or it's hard to find when you have a minute to actually work on it. So Ashley, if you can put my email in the chat, I don't want Lisa bombarded with this part, but how would you as active LAC participants, especially like advocacy updates, like one maybe nugget per week that you can act upon, or like one document for the month? And then when you get to it, I'm just struggling because I think I can do a better job of getting that to you to act upon than what we're currently doing. And the other piece for 2024 is our advocacy toolkit has been updated, but I haven't done a good job of getting that back out to people also. So I'm going to be working with Ashley, our intern. She's done a lot of work on it, but we just need to get that in your hands for 2024 also. So please look for that. And I apologize, I don't have a slide for the last two issues, but I wanted to get those up front. How would it be best to get advocacy alerts to you, and to just keep an eye out for that advocacy toolkit for 2024? Thank you so much. And I'm happy to take any questions or want to leave room and time for the next set of slides. Thank you.
Whoops, I muted. Ashley put your contact in the chat. Thank you, Amy. I did want to note that Angela, thanks Angela Parth, the Michigan Network for Youth and Family Dome Day, that's their Michigan Capital Day is advocacy event is March 5th of 2024. And I did want to just, this is early for those of you on the call, a bonus. We are looking at doing ours, our homelessness advocacy day on April 11th. So you will see a lot more from us on that, but that's our tentative date. And we will be confirming that very shortly and would love to have you put that on your calendar and join us. So I think that's it. We had an action-packed afternoon so far, an hour. Thanks for everyone. Yeah, if you wanted to get updates, we can add you to our mailing list. There's also a button on our website, which is right here, mihomeless.org. You can follow us on our social media. We're very active. And I just appreciate all of you. We have one more minute if anyone has any questions or any thoughts to end the day.
Just to remind you, this same Zoom link that you've been using will apply for January, but the meeting itself will be on January 8th. We assumed you'd all be a little too tired from New Year's Eve to join us on the 1st. So if you've registered for the whole year, you'll be all set. Just keep in mind that'll revert to the 8th. And then starting in the subsequent meetings, we'll post out a new Zoom link for 2024. But just as a reminder, the next meeting's on the 8th.
Thank you, Amy. And some folks might be busy watching football on New Year's Day. So who knows? So thank you, everyone. Thanks for all your advocacy. We appreciate all of you, and I wish you all very happy, healthy, and safe holidays and a happy new year. And we will see you in January on the 8th.